You're listening to the Station 71 podcast with your hosts, Mario,
Beth,
Brian,
and Matt.
So this week, as you noticed, we have a very special guest on. Matt, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
It's awesome to have you. We're going to be talking this week a little bit about something that about half of us really don't have that much experience with. We did our on-property show, so now we're going to be doing an off-property show, giving you the pros and cons of staying at a non-Disney resort. But, as always, we're going to start with the news this week. So, first up, we have a rumor that Illumination's replacement will be debuting sooner than expected. So the very basic gist of this article is that Illumination's Windows on the World is the rumored name. It's going to be featuring Disney characters much like Fantasmic, a lot of the tech from Rivers of Light that we were supposed to see, and possibly drones. As of right now, nothing is set in stone, but it's rumored to be coming sometime in 2020. How do you guys feel about this? Because I'm
I'm nervous. After I saw what happened with Rivers of Light, when I hear that they're trying to expedite this and get it moved up, and especially now that they're saying that they're borrowing some of the technology that was supposed to be in Rivers of Light, I don't know. I'm nervous. I don't want this to be another hodgepodge thrown together place filler because they haven't developed it like they want to.
I'm going to make you a little bit more nervous because I forgot part of this article. They also said that they could possibly debut an interim show before it actually goes live.
Oh boy.
So
oh yeah, let's get some Jungle Book.
So throwing it back to Jungle Book, we might see more of that.
Oh my god, no.
I'm indifferent just because I love Illumination so much. I'm going to be so afraid to see it go. But it needs an update really badly. I also don't know how I feel about the drone technology. They're kind of banking on that holiday show that they did at Disney Springs last year, I believe. And after seeing videos of that, I'm just not sold on the drones.
I didn't watch videos of that because I was trying to actually get down there and see it myself, so I was trying not to spoil it, but I don't know. I would be excited at the prospect of a Fantasmic-esque show because Fantasmic is my favorite, but like Brian said, the fact that they even included Rivers of Light in the same sentence makes me nervous.
I agree. I think that the way that Disney is going now, everything has to be IP based, and some people could see that as a good thing, but I mean, people like us who really appreciate the original stuff, it kind of scares me a little bit, honestly.
Yeah. And if one park needs to have a nighttime show that isn't IP based, it's Epcot.
Yeah,
I agree.
totally.
Absolutely.
I just want to know what they're going to, is there going to be a story to it or what? Because the articles that I read were kind of loosely saying that there's just going to feature characters in it. So if it's anything like Fantasmic, where the whole story is around a character and the characters that appear in the show have a reason to be there, I feel like there's no chance that it's not going to be tied to every Disney IP ever.
I think they could do it well and not make it tacky at Epcot if they made it relevant to the World Showcase, different, the different characters that are actually from those countries.
So you mean it's going to be Frozen Windows to the World?
Well, see, I have always had a problem with Frozen being in Norway because it's not actually in Norway, but I guess Aladdin isn't really in Morocco either, so I guess I can't complain too much. But yeah, hopefully it's not Frozen Central.
Oh gosh, I would not be happy with that. I think if they did it the way that you're talking about, where it's kind of loosely tied to the IPs, where it's the countries have character representation, kind of. I think I would be okay with that. But I don't know. It feels like there's a lot going on right now, and that's really worrisome. That's my biggest concern.
I'm also interested if they're going to be including characters, how they're going to make it, like, you know, right now you can pretty much watch Illuminations from all the way around the World Showcase, with the exception of a few spots where you don't get a great view. Like, how are they going to do that with characters?
The other thing that this article said that I totally forgot to mention, and thank you for reminding me, is that they're actually supposedly building a new show area for it, too. So it's not going to take place on World Showcase Lagoon. It's going to be, I want to say it was behind the Japan Pavilion. Like, there's going to be an actual entranceway to it, and it's going to be its own little thing, which is where a lot of the confusion was coming up, because there's the whole no-fly laws in Disney. So they kind of have to figure out a path for the drones to get in, figure out how they can get it so that they're not flying over people to set up and tear down the show, and then kind of work with it that way. All that said, the fact that they're trying to push for 2020, it's still really scary.
I hope that this has kind of been a rumor for a while now, so I'm hoping that they've at least been trying to develop it and won't just throw it together.
Let's hope.
So next up, we have solar facilities arriving to Walt Disney World that will be powering 2 theme parks. This is super exciting, and I know that Beth is probably really excited about this, Miss Environmental over here. I briefly read this, so I don't know if you have any more information than I do on it, but it looks like they're going to be powering Epcot and Animal Kingdom.
I think what they were saying is that the solar facility they're building will generate enough energy to power 2 of the theme parks, that it's not necessarily going to be like solely powering any of the theme parks in particular, but the fact that it can produce enough energy to fully power 2 of the theme parks is incredible. And I just, like you said, Miss Conservation over here, this is really exciting to me.
Yeah, and it looks like in the article it actually said that during peak hours, Sun will provide 20% of the power that Disney needs for these theme parks, which is crazy. Like, that is a lot of electricity. But this is so cool, and it goes right with the theming of Animal Kingdom. So I'm very excited about this, too.
Definitely.
Anything else on that, or?
Oh, no.
We're breezing through that.
It's exciting to try and reverse climate change, y'all.
Next up, we have a lot of news this week. I just want to say that right now. But next up, we have more video of Toy Story Land. This time, it's the attractions at night, which is super awesome. I know we're getting really close. By the time that this episode's out, it'll actually be open, which is crazy to me. But these videos just made me so much more exciting. Like, I really cannot wait to experience this land.
Yeah, I am hoping that, and I don't think that it'll have the same effect as Pandora, but I'm hoping that it doesn't stay crazy. I can't imagine that the rides would produce that much demand as Flight of Passage. I don't know.
I mean, like, I can't imagine it being as tight as Flight of Passage, but I feel like Slinky Dog Dash is going to draw a huge crowd. Plus, what else is there in Hollywood Studios, really? So, there's going to be crowds there for a while.
Tower of Terror.
Yeah, but come on.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen anything yet until Galaxy's Edge opens.
Yeah, that's going to be insane. But so far, the reviews on Toy Story Land have been super positive. I know we were kind of talking about, like, cast member previews and stuff like that we've heard, like, rumors from. But I heard a couple, like, really, really positive reviews that people were, like, leaving Toy Story Land, like, feeling super nostalgic and, like, having that happy tear moment where it's just, like, you know that that's a sign that this land is going to be really cool.
Yeah.
And next up, we have 4 new hotels confirmed to be coming to the edge of Walt Disney World, and this article was a little bit misleading because I thought that we were getting some Disney hotels. However, we're getting 4 non-Disney hotels, Homewood Suites, Home 2 Suites, Fairfield Inn, and Residence Inn. And the plans are also going to include a massive retail shopping space, like right outside of Disney. This is interesting to me because I know that Disney's been kind of like having that outside expansion for a while with non-Disney hotels. So it's nice for the people that do really utilize off-property resorts because this is going to be really close. And I think that shopping space is probably going to draw in a lot of people as well.
Yeah, and from this article, it's saying that they're trying to hit a lower price point than most of the stuff in Disney Springs is as far as the retail that's offered. But the thing that kind of is exciting for me, and I think a lot of people that are on property or right off property, is that it's supposed to feature a grocery and drugstores, which are kind of the things that are lacking, I feel like, on Disney property. So being able to have access to a grocery store that close, I think is going to be a huge positive.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Anything else on that one? So for all the news, it's very, very brief. But last up, we have some more information on the Disney Play app, which we talked a little bit about last week. I thought this was super neat, but the app's going to feature different games and stuff depending on where you are in the park. A lot of them will be in the queues for attractions to try to kind of combat people looking at their phones and social media while standing in the queues, because we all know that you can wait forever in some of those Disney lines. As of right now, the only thing it looks like is going to be in Walt Disney World is during Slinky Dog. But they were testing it at Peter Pan's Flight in Disneyland, and there were some pretty interesting reviews about it. But the main thing that I really wanted to point out is that it's going to have... I totally just lost my place on my notes. Wow. Oh, okay. So the big thing about this is that it is going to be for the longer attractions, the ones with the longer queues, and I think Peter Pan was probably the perfect one to test that on because the line is always outrageous. And it's going to feature different things like trivia about the park, and you're going to be awarded achievements for playing the games as well. So that's kind of cool. But the last little piece that I wanted to throw in there, which is a little odd to me, is that guests will also be able to access Apple Music from in the app, and will have access to audio experiences featuring official playlists inspired by the beloved theme park lands. So that kind of is really cool, but I don't think I know anyone that uses Apple Music.
Yeah.
Nope.
So I kind of I feel like I want to get Apple Music just for when I go down, just to see if it's worth it for that alone. That might sway me, but the price point for Apple Music is so insane that I don't think I would actually stick with it. I'm wondering if they're going to move this to any other platform, because it's also available on Android too, and that would just totally eliminate the option entirely.
Right, so I would feel like they would eventually want to move into Spotify, because I feel like Spotify has a pretty good reach into both Apple and Android users. But, if they have a deal with Apple, I'm sure that's what drove this.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking, was there's probably some kind of Apple sponsorship somewhere. But I'm wondering if they're going to put, and this is probably just the Disney nerd in me, are they going to put the background audio loops in those playlists? Because if they did, that would mean that Disney's going to release some kind of CD somewhere with the audio loops, and I'm all about that. I will buy that in an instant.
Yeah, that'd be pretty awesome. The thing that I heard, which I can't find any news to confirm this unless I overread in the article, is that playing these games could potentially, if you get a high enough score, unlock additional fast passes and stuff like that.
That would be pretty cool.
Which
that would be kind of cool.
Yeah, so that, I guess maybe I heard it on another podcast or something. I can't remember, but for some reason that's popping out in my head, so I hope I didn't make it up, because that does sound really awesome. And if I did make it up, Disney, you can keep it. Just do it.
The other thing that I heard too is some of the games will actually unlock things with animatronics as well. Like, I heard that the one that they were testing at Peter Pan's Flight in Disneyland had like a special animatronic ending once you've reached the end of the queue. But that would be pretty cool. Kind of like the Phineas and Ferb thing.
Yeah.
Agent P's whatever in World Showcase. So that would be kind of neat.
Yeah, that would be cool.
But they're also planning to expand it with Galaxy's Edge, which we all kind of figured because they're making that as immersive as possible.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that kind of sticks out to me in this, with this idea and just the whole app in general, do you think this could be a way for them to try and sell more fuel rods in the park? Because with this game, it'll totally drain people's batteries. They won't be expecting it, and they're going to need to buy these fuel rods. So it's a way for Disney to essentially make an extra, $30?
That's a good point.
That's interesting. I feel like you kind of have to subscribe to the whole fuel rod thing now with how much you use the My Disney Experience app. Mm-hmm. So adding another app is just going to drain your battery even further.
Exactly.
Do you guys know anyone that uses the actual fuel rods? Like, I have, like, a battery pack of my own that I take that's a lot stronger than the fuel rods, but the idea of the fuel rod is kind of, appealing in the sense, if anybody's listening and you don't know what we're talking about, there are these kiosks located in various places around the parks where you can get a portable battery pack for your phone, like a USB-style charger, and you pay $30 once, if I'm not mistaken, and then you can, when the battery dies, you can just exchange it for no charge. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
So I've never met anyone that actually uses that system. So I'm curious to see if you guys have.
I haven't personally. I have my own battery backup, like you were saying. But these aren't that prevalent in the park. They don't have as many locations as I would think they would really want to have, if they were really, really trying to push this.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, like, for the price of them, I mean, if you really thought about it and really kind of did your research, you would know how much you're using your phone. We just bought battery packs from, I think it was Walmart, for like $10. And they last like the whole day. They'll charge your phone a second time, and we're totally stocked up and ready to go for this next trip. And it's like half the price that they would be at Disney. Like, crazy.
Oh yeah.
And I'll be the voice of Kirsten. They should just bring back the charging stations at Cosmic Rays.
Yes. Oh my
There
God.
we go.
That was the best.
She can't be here, but I'll be her voice. So do you guys want to move on to some of our listener feedback stuff that we got over the week? Because we got a couple things I wanted to talk about real quick.
Yeah.
So, first up, Evan, one of our listeners, wanted to say kudos to Beth for her work on the Animal Kingdom Part 2 episode.
Woo woo!
Go Beth.
There was a lot of positive feedback about all your information about Animal Kingdom being an AZA-accredited zoo and all of the stuff that Disney's doing for conservation. So awesome. Thank you very much for that, Beth, because we love hearing things like that, and that makes all of the hard work that much more enjoyable.
Definitely.
He also said that us talking about the poacher scene brought back a lot of dark memories about Big Red and Little Red. Rest in peace. and that the last time he wrote it, the speaker on his ride shared some very shocking and unsettling facts about animals and their decline, and basically he got off the ride and felt like he needed to do something, which is crazy cool, but also like ties into the fact that we were talking about the videos before the ride being like super depressing. So at least it's doing its job, right?
Yeah, and, hearing this makes me kind of, glad that they did take away that aspect of the ride, because you know, as much as you want people to get off of the safari saying, you know, conservation, I want to go help, you know, animals and help the environment, you don't want them coming off like, you know, disillusioned and feeling sad and hopeless and just like, well, I guess I can't make a difference, so why even try? So it's good that they did turn it around in that sense, for sure.
Though I do miss the story aspect of that ride.
I do wish that there was more of a story to it, for sure.
And then our last listener email that had a couple questions, one of our listeners, Sarah, sent us an email and asked if we had any favorite obscure references in a Disney park, like a movie that's not very popular or something that most people wouldn't catch. I kind of thought about this a little bit, and I cannot come up with one, so I'm interested to see if you guys have anything. The only thing that I could really think of was, like, and this is really dumb, but you know how if you go to where New Fantasyland is, and they have, like, that, kind of like the extra castle spires that are, like, back towards, like, the carousel. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a wall, and there's, like, some castle spires. On the top of the spires, there's squirrels carved into them. And I like things like that. It's really dumb, but those are the little details that I love about Disney.
That's pretty cool.
But I didn't know if you guys had any, like, movie references or anything, because I could not think of one.
Nothing comes to mind for Disney World for me, but having just gone to Disneyland, the one ride that I did appreciate being kind of an obscure reference was they had a Roger Rabbit themed ride, and I really love Roger Rabbit, and I feel like because it came out, you know, in like 1988 or something, and was kind of more geared towards adults, that a lot of kids these days don't really know who Roger Rabbit is or haven't watched the movie, so I did appreciate that one in particular.
It's pretty cool.
That's interesting. Do you have a favorite obscure reference, Brian?
You know, I can't really think of one offhand either. This is a good question, though. This is something I wanna think on and come back to, because I think this is a good, like, superlative or show topic that we could definitely do.
Mm-hmm.
We can definitely save it for that. But she did have another question. Actually, do you have an obscure reference, Matt? I'm sorry, I almost forgot you.
It's all good. I actually do have one, and it's kind of well known, but it's also a reference to an old ride with Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, and how they have the little statue outside of Haunted Mansion of Mr. Toad.
That's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Or the picture frame in Pooh, where he's handing the deed over to Al.
Yeah.
I like references like that, too. Like, that's really cool.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good one that I didn't think of. I was also going to just point out that I believe there's also a billboard in Hollywood Studios that has Roger Rabbit on it, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, oh my gosh, I'm having a moment. I can't remember
Baby
what the store is
Herman,
called.
I think, is actually who's on it.
Well, there was the whole shop in Studios that had a bunch of Roger Rabbit references in it, and I can't remember if that's there or not. I think it's the prop shop.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
If I remember correctly, there's also a Rocketeer reference in there somewhere, which that's super obscure Disney. But she also had another question about pin trading. She wanted to know if we had a favorite trading pin, which kind of ties into that because she has a Gurgi pin from Black Cauldron. I honestly have not seen that movie in so long, so I apologize if I mispronounced that.
That's right.
Okay, cool. But she just wanted to know if we had a favorite pin. She also left a comment on the bottom of this email that I'm going to totally ignore because
Sarah, if you are listening to this podcast, and I hope you are the new #1 fan of Station 71. She signed this, a fellow fan of the Country Bears. Sarah, you are awesome. You're my favorite fan.
Ignoring that and going back to a question, there's a couple pins that I like, but I don't think I would ever trade, and we kind of discussed this a little bit on our pin trading episode. I have a couple Hercules pins that I found, and that's like my all-time favorite Disney movie that's super underrepresented in the park. So just having even the representation as pins is really cool. I also have a trifold Tangled pin that I bought at the Contemporary, and I really love that pin, so that's really cool. But those are my two favorite pins that I have.
I'm standing at my pin board.
I'm doing the same thing right
I'm
now.
like, which one is my favorite?
Can you really pick a favorite child?
I know,
It's
right?
not possible.
You know, so many of mine, it's like the ones that I really, well, almost all the ones that I keep now, you know, I would probably never trade the majority of the ones that I actually have on my pin board. But, you know, just like a lot of them I have specific memories from. And like some of my favorite ones are like the campground ones that I collected over the years, just because, you know, that was a big part of me and my family going to Disney every year. I'll say visually, probably my favorite ones are the set of the Haunted Mansion special edition ones from, I believe that was last year, 2017. Just have a really, really cool, unique design to them.
Yeah, I really love so many of my pins. It's hard to pick a favorite, but just in general, I really kind of to the same thing Brian was saying, is that I try to get a pin. I usually everybody goes to Epcot during a festival these days because there's always a festival, but I always try to get a pin for whatever festival is going on or whatever event I'm going to. So I have, you know, Not So Scary pins and Food and Wine pins and Flower and Garden pins with the different years on them, and it's just kind of nice to see those like lined up because it's like got all the different years on it.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe just that as a general answer. There's also a really cool one actually that I do love that's from Living with the Land, and it's not so much the pin itself. The pin is really cute. It's got Chip and Dale holding a big pumpkin that's the shape of a Mickey head. But the thing that I really liked about it was that the pin board that it came on was actually made out of like this biodegradable paper that had seeds embedded in it, so you could plant it.
That's really cool.
So that was one thing that I did really like.
You're going to have to post a picture of this because I'm not familiar with any of the Living with the Land ones.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
What about you, Matt?
Well, yeah, my favorite pin is actually a very stupid pin. It's like, so my girlfriend and I have gone 2 times this year together, and she had bought a Daisy shirt to match the Donald shirt that I was wearing the first time that we went. So I found this Donald pin. Like, it's just a very stupid, like, one of those ones that come in a pack where you know it's like a trader pack. But I traded for one just to have it to maybe trade later. And it was like Donald in a swimsuit. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll find the Daisy one. And then that was the first pin I traded for that day. And then I got the matching Daisy one the very last pin of the day. So it was just kind of cool, the story behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
cool.
that's awesome.
I think that's like the best part of pin trading is like you have that cast member interaction and the story to go with it. Mm-hmm. Because like how many other souvenirs can you really say that about?
True.
So, with that said, that ties up our listener correspondence. Do you guys want to dive into our topic of Disney off-property?
Let's do it.
Okay, so I'm going to actually turn this over to Matt and Beth because you guys have a lot more experience than Brian and I do. It's going to be a little interesting because I've never stayed off-property, so I'm going to have some questions for you guys as you're going through stuff. And I think Brian said he stayed once. But you're also local.
I want to say 2 or 3 years in a row, me and my family stayed off property, but now this was at least 10 years ago. So take that into consideration on these opinions that I give. So.
Right, and you're local too, so you kind of have that experience end of it. So you face a lot of the same issues.
Right.
But we're gonna dive into this and see how this goes. Beth, it looks like you've got a clear breakdown, so this is your floor.
All right. So just, I guess, as a little bit of background, I have stayed off property pretty much every single time, aside from one particular trip where I stayed a night at Pop Century and then a few nights at Port Orleans Riverside. So considering the fact that I've been to Disney World about 14 times or so, that's a lot of staying off property.
Wow.
So there are a lot of different pros and cons to staying off of property. So I'm just going to go through them kind of how I have it set up here and start off with parking, because I feel like that's just transportation in general, I guess, is the thing that most people think about first. So obviously, if you are staying off property, then unless you're an annual pass holder, you're going to have to pay for parking when you go to the theme parks, whereas resort guests do not have to pay, which that can get pretty expensive if you're going to the parks multiple days, considering that preferred parking is $45 a day, standard is $22, and oversized vehicle parking is $27. So the good thing is that you just have to pay once and it's valid for all 4 theme parks that day, but it can get kind of expensive if you're doing multiple days at the parks. So that is definitely a major con as far as transportation goes. But you do have a couple of options. You can rent a car. A lot of times that is going to be your cheapest route if you're planning on going to a lot of different places, or if you're planning on going to the parks a lot. A lot of times it can be cheaper to rent a car. If you don't want to do that, you can also try a Lyft or Uber, because there's actually a drop-off area and you don't get charged for parking when you get dropped off. So a lot of times that can be cheaper than the parking fees. If you take a round-trip Lyft, it's usually $12 to $15 each way. So depending on the day and whether or not you get surge pricing, or if you leave at a peak time, get stuck in traffic and have to pay more, it can be cheaper. A lot of off-property resorts also have different shuttles to and from the parks. The problem with those, in my opinion, the biggest problem, is that a lot of times they will stop at multiple hotels, like kind of sister hotels, so it can take a long time. And then sometimes they'll also stop at multiple theme parks, so you get stuck going to Disney World and Universal and SeaWorld, and so you can be on the bus for a really long time. But a lot of times it's complimentary, so that can save you a bunch of money. Sometimes, unfortunately, it's not. So it's kind of up to you guys as far as what your plan is on your trip. Whether you want to try that or Uber, rent a car. But aside from strictly money costs of transportation, another con of staying off-site, well, it can be a pro or a con, is that the Disney bubble is, as far as staying on property goes, you get in this Disney bubble where everything is super highly themed, and you get to forget about the real world and not have to think about traffic or, anybody else outside of the resort. So when you're in this Disney bubble, it can be really nice because you have the transportation to get everywhere you need to. If you want to go to the parks or the water parks, or you want to go to different resorts, you can, kind of use transfers from the parks, and you have the monorails and the boats and whatever else. You can go to Disney Springs with the resort transportation. So that was definitely a plus when I stayed on property, because I personally hate driving, and it's a 7-hour drive from where I live, so I'm super ready to not have to drive when I get down there. So when I did stay on property, I thought that was a really big perk, is that I didn't even touch my car like the whole time we were there until we left.
So I'm guessing you obviously drive yourself down there, Beth, right?
Yes.
What is your tactic for getting to and from the parks when you get to Disney properties and you're staying off property? Just because you already have your vehicle with you, are you using Uber and Lyft, or are you driving yourself to the park?
Well, it kind of depends. So if I'm staying close enough and it's, pretty cheap to take the Uber or the Lyft, that's usually, that would definitely be my preference. especially if I'm going to Epcot, because drinking. But
It's
usually
become your thing.
it's totally my shtick now. I'll take it. But we usually drive to the parks, and because I'm an annual pass holder, we don't have to pay for parking, so that's pretty nice. But the big problem with it that I didn't even really realize was a big problem until I stayed on property was that you kind of feel restricted. It's like once you get there, it's like you leave your car and you go to the parks and you're like, well, I don't want to go back to the hotel because it's going to take me, 20 minutes to get there, or 15, 20 minutes, however far away you're staying. Then you have the time that you're at the resort, and then you have to drive 15, 20 minutes back. You have to deal with traffic and parking again, and either riding the tram and walking back into the gates. And it's just so inconvenient. And I didn't realize what a luxury it was until I stayed on property.
Yeah.
That you don't have to do that.
From what I can remember, staying both on and off property, staying on property, I think gives you a lot more room to kind of be spontaneous with your vacation. And just, you don't have to plan it out as much. If you decide halfway through the day that, hey, like you're saying, you want to head back to the hotel or you want to hop to another park or anything like that, like it makes it a lot more convenient if you're staying on property to do those things.
Yeah, definitely. And so I feel like that time did kind of spoil me, because now I'm just like, I just want to go back and take a nap, but it's such a waste of time. But it can also kind of be a pro, in my opinion, to stay off property and not be in the Disney bubble. For me personally, I have friends that live in the Orlando area, so, they go to Disney all the time, and if I want to go to the parks, they'll go to the parks with me. But usually they just kind of want to do, their usual stuff, and they have their hangout spots that they like to go, and it's kind of fun to feel like a local in a way when I'm with them, because we're, just, it doesn't feel like you're at Disney World, but then the next day you're like standing in Magic Kingdom, which I think is fun because, I don't know, it gives you different perspectives in the same trip in a way. But also it can kind of be an inconvenience to stay on property if you're planning on doing other stuff outside of Disney. So if you're planning on going to SeaWorld or Universal or, any of the mini shopping areas and other amenities that the Orlando area has to offer, it's like, well, Disney doesn't want you to leave, so they're not going to make it easy for you. So you do have to, going back to, you'd have to get a Lyft or an Uber or rent a car. So I feel like that can be kind of an inconvenience if that's the type of trip that you have planned. But if you're planning on staying at Disney and you want the full Disney experience and you don't want to think about anything else, staying on property is definitely the way to go.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I've stayed off property 4 times and I've stayed on property only once. So it's vastly different because on property is fresh in my mind, considering I just did it this past weekend for the first time. But correct me if I'm wrong. When you park at Disney Springs, it's free parking. Are you able to take the transportation to the parks even if you aren't a resort guest?
So the way that it works is, you're right, Disney Springs is free parking, but they don't have shuttles directly to the parks from Disney Springs. So it is possible for you to kind of get around paying for parking, but you would have to take a shuttle from Disney Springs to a resort and then transportation from that resort to a park. So that's a lot of wasted time, in my opinion, and not worth it for real.
Or you could just take the best transportation and take a boat to Port Orleans from Disney Springs. But that's all I had to contribute to that.
I mean, if you're not in a hurry and, you're looking to save money, it's not a bad option, especially if you are taking the boat. But I personally, it's just, that's too much of a hassle for me. And I feel like most people aren't going to want to spend that time, which is definitely why Disney didn't make shuttles directly from Disney Springs to the parks.
Yeah, you got to ask yourself, is it the probably hour and a half plus that you're gonna waste basically getting over there now worth the $20 for parking.
Right, exactly.
No, I was gonna say the flip side of that. Now, Matt being farther up north, I'm sure that you guys probably don't drive down because that's a headache for me, and you're a little bit further than I am. How do you guys get down, and what's your transportation situation when you get down there?
Well, I've flown down every single time I've gone. I've never driven because that would be probably about a 22-hour drive. So
Sounds about right.
Not all about that one. But once we're down there, my parents usually rent a car if they are there. But I can't rent a car because I'm not 25 yet, so I can't personally do that. And but when my parents were staying off property, we stayed with them, and they stayed at Regal Palms Resort, which is about 25 minutes outside of Disney. And we Ubered to and from the parks. And
Okay.
Yeah. It was probably about $20 each way. So it can get a little pricey, but it's the same as paying for parking essentially when you think about it if you go to the parks multiple days.
So it sounds like between the two of you, Uber seems to be the way to go.
Yeah, for Disney World, I would definitely agree. Just as a little aside from my Disneyland trip, I did not want to make my friend that we were staying with get up early and drive us an hour to Disneyland from where he lives. So we took a Lyft from his house to the parks. And so long story short, we were talking about how do I get from your place to the parks without making you drive? And he's like, well, it'd probably just be cheapest for you to rent a car. And I was like, I am not driving in Los Angeles. I'm just not going to do it. So I'm just going to take an Uber. And it ended up being, I believe, $60 each way. So that was a pretty big chunk of change. So
That's insane.
I definitely see it as a blessing now at Disney World that is not the case. Not only do you not have to drive an hour, you also don't have to pay $60 both ways. But anyway, that's my little soapbox.
Now that I've derailed you a little bit, you were talking about the Disney bubble.
Yeah, and that's just, again, that's another thing that was crazy to me about Disneyland is that bubble doesn't exist. It's like I walked across the street from an IHOP, like I said last week. It was bizarre. But anyway, moving on. Going back to the Disney bubble, another big pro about Disney resorts is that, and I'm sure you guys can relate to this, it just feels different to stay in a Disney resort. It's much more highly themed, obviously, and I think just the atmosphere of it just feels different than staying in a off-site property. So, I've even stayed at the Hilton in Disney Springs one time, which is technically on property, and it's not a Disney resort. So it just felt like another hotel. Like, it was a nice hotel, had good amenities and stuff. I still got the shuttle and the extra magic hours, but it was just another hotel. Mm-hmm. It's totally different to be in one of those resorts.
I agree. And kind of along those lines, another hotel that I have experience with is the Swan and Dolphin. It's not a Disney hotel. It's on Disney property. It's a weird kind of like halfway. If I recall correctly, cast members are actually the staff there, but it's not owned by Disney. So it's hard to explain. Like, you get that same level of like Disney service, but obviously you're not getting the theming and everything. Which it is. It's a nice hotel, and certainly for the price point, you're getting more than you would at a similarly priced Disney hotel. But you're just really missing a big part, in my opinion, of what the Disney vacation is.
Yeah, and that's interesting that you say that, because I've thought about the Swan and Dolphin before, because like you said, it is a lot less than the other nearby properties, but just the idea of walking to Epcot is really appealing. But if you're going to go, it's like go big or go home, I guess.
Right. And I can see where certain people like this. Like, this was actually my parents' go-to resort. They always wanted to stay here if they went on a trip without me or my brother. And, to each their own, I guess. I think that this is good for people that are kind of in that mid-range, that they don't want all that, in-your-face Disney theming, but they want to be very close to the parks. And especially with my parents, like it was Epcot for them, was the park that they went to most of the time. So you get, you're close to the park, you get good Disney service, but you don't have the Disney theming so much in your face.
Mm-hmm. Can I also just throw out there that it drives me nuts when people stay at Disney properties and don't appreciate the theming? Because I work with a guy who, when I first started working there, everybody started slowly finding out that I was a Disney fanatic. He was like, "Oh yeah, I went to Disney World with my family so many years ago, blah blah, and we stayed at some hotel that was really close to the big park, the Magic Kingdom. I think it was like the Grand Floridian." And I was like, "Are you serious? You think it was at the big park? You think it was the Grand Floridian? You don't deserve to stay there." All he did that trip was play golf, you guys. Doesn't that hurt your soul?
That just really broke my heart.
Worst.
That hurts my wallet and my soul.
I know, to have the money to just flippantly stay at the Grand Floridian.
Oh my gosh, I have to stand up on my soapbox for a second too, because I know we've talked about this privately, but 2 years ago, my aunt and uncle took my cousin for the first time. Now, my dad's side of the family is not as big into Disney as my mom's side of the family is, so I'm the only one on that side of the family that really appreciates it. And they asked me for planning advice, even though my dad's cousin is like a Disney travel agent or whatever, and she planned everything for them. I told them right away, I was like, "You are cramming so much stuff into your trip." To put it into perspective, there's 7 days in the park. Every day looked like our Disney in a day planning.
That sounds awful.
So tight. Like, it was every 15 minutes was planned out. And I told them, I was like, "You guys are going to have an awful time." And I was like, "You need to give yourself some time to breathe and just appreciate it." And no one listened to me. They come home. My uncle is like, "I never want to go to Disney again." He's like, it was just, you have to plan every second of it. You have to do this and that. I'm like, "No, you should have just listened to me." But I think they stayed at Saratoga Springs or Old Key West. And like, I can understand why they weren't thrilled about their hotel there, because the theming isn't like superb, but it's still like one of the nicer resorts. Like, I don't know. There's just so many things like that where I'm like, just listen to me and ask me your questions. And that's my soapbox for the day.
So kind of to segue into that, or segue away from that, I guess. I think the biggie that most people talk about, since we were talking about people not appreciating Disney resorts and their pricing, that is a really big difference between staying on property and off property most times. Now, you can definitely stay on property for cheaper or equivalent to staying on property, but I do feel like the amenities as far as the room itself are going to vary pretty drastically. So I actually looked up, just for kicks. I was like, let me do a little comparison here. So last time I went to Disney in February, I stayed at the Marriott Harbor Lake, which was a really nice resort. It had a full kitchen. It was, big room, and the room I had personally only slept 4 people, but I looked up the pricing for a 2-bedroom villa with a balcony. So it had a king bed, 2 queens, a sofa bed, and 2 bathrooms, and it slept 8 people total. It was $348 a night. Whereas at the Boardwalk, a 2-bedroom villa with 1 king, one queen, a queen-size sleeper, and a double-size sleeper, and a bunk-sized pull-down bed, and single pull-down bed, which sleeps 9. The pricing was $965 per night. So, if you have a big family, this is definitely going to help your budget a lot to stay off property, but in other ways, you can definitely find good deals. So you can wait until Disney announces their different, spring, summer, fall promotions that they do pretty much every year. A lot of times you can get pretty good deals on at least the values and the moderates, in my opinion. And if you've listened to the show at all, you guys know how much we all love Port Orleans, because it's a moderate that feels like a deluxe. So a lot of times Riverside in particular has really good rates. So definitely keep on those deals if you want to stay on property.
The other thing kind of off of that, I don't know if we mentioned this on our resort show too, you can book the stay. A lot of times you can find like the calendar of Disney previous discounts. I know Mouse Savers usually has one. And you can see what the last year's deals were, book your stay, and then as they come out, call in and say, hey, I want to take advantage of this deal. Can you kind of move my reservation around? And Disney will accommodate that. Mm-hmm. Now, kind of to counter that point, you always have to remember that Disney only has a select number of rooms blocked out for those discounts. So, for example, we booked our trip coming up. We're staying at Port Orleans. I know that one of the deals that they usually run is about 25% off in that time frame, if for Disney Visa card members. Now, if I wait on that a little too long, they might sell out of their rooms in that resort, and if I'm not flexible, I don't get the deal. So kind of, if you want to save a little bit of money, try to be flexible, try to remember that Disney does those things, and be willing to work with them, because 9 times out of 10, if you're willing to work with a cast member, they'll work with you.
And to piggyback off of that a little bit, Disney is still running their free dining promotion for this year. I think that ends July 7th, that you're able to book through to get free dining. And I was just looking last week, and you're able to book in early September or October, and you could get 6 nights with this would all include your park tickets, your room, and all of your food. And it was about $700 for each for 4 people. And when you put that into perspective with all that you're getting, that's a pretty good deal. Granted, this was at the All-Star Sports Resort, but still, that's crazy when it comes to savings when you put it into perspective of how much you could actually be spending whenever you do have to factor in food and the park tickets on top of your room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I usually take advantage of free dining, so I can always kind of hop on that and say it's worth it.
See, my problem with the packages is that, and I'm sure Brian can relate to this as well, is that as an annual pass holder, you don't need tickets, so that's kind of a bummer.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times they'll do room-only deals, which is nice, but have they come out with a way to do the... you can't do free dining as a pass holder, but you can add dining, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know. I've never tried to do it.
Yeah, me either. I'll have to find out.
Yeah.
There's a new experiment for you guys.
And kind of on that note, too, I'll say I almost never use a pass holder discount on a room just because the Florida resident rates are usually a better savings than the pass holder discount, which I don't know, that doesn't really make sense to me, but
only we were all Florida residents.
I mean, I at least wish I was closer.
Yeah, me too.
We're 20 plus hour drives here. But yeah, I think that's the biggest thing to kind of look at if you're going to stay on Disney property is kind of the discounts they offer. Usually that's what sways me into booking my trips and when I'm booking them.
Mm-hmm. So I guess to kind of wrap it up, just a couple extra cons to throw on there is that obviously you don't get extra magic hours if you're staying off property. and your Fast Pass window becomes 30 days instead of 60 days for resort guests. So, a couple of other things to add on to the pros of staying on property. So, ultimately, I think what you need to do is look at your trip, look at what you want to accomplish, and your group in general, and your budget. And you can figure it out from there, what's going to be worth it to you.
So, I have a question for all three of you. Since you all kind of have experience with this one, has the whole Fast Pass window been an issue for you guys, like, at all? I know we've talked about Brian and Beth having some good luck here and there, but do you find having that 30-day window versus the 60-day is really, like, that big of a con?
I'm going to mainly turn this over to Beth. I'll say my opinion, but I don't think that this has a big effect on the majority of our listeners or really people that go to Disney in general. But because I'm local, I'll say that it's an annoyance that because I have the 30-day window, I'm not going to say most. Some of the e-ticket attractions are basically just a no-go for me. Unless I get extremely lucky, I'm not going to get any Pandora Fast Passes. I'm not going to get a Seven Dwarfs Mine Train Fast Pass. I'm not going to get a Frozen Fast Pass. And there's a few others that are more or less difficult to get, but those are pretty much out the window. I've almost never gotten one of those. But because I am local, I kind of just pick and choose. Like if I want to go on a certain day and I see that there's not a good Fast Pass selection, I'll just look a couple days before or after that to try to get better ones. But that's a luxury that I know a lot of people don't have when they're planning to go to Disney. You kind of have to plan when you're going, and then once you get to your window, you kind of have to work with what you've got there.
So, real quick before you turn that over to them, have you gotten lucky and gotten like good e-ticket attractions? I'm sure you probably have.
I have, but I'll say for as often as I go, like I do not get lucky very, very often at all with those.
That's really sad.
So, I mean, if there's something specific that we really, really want to do that we haven't gotten to do in a long time, we do plan to look at the very start of our 30-day window so that we'll have at least a better option to do it. But yeah, I'll say I haven't had the only Fast Pass that I got for anything in Pandora was one that was a paper Fast Pass that was given to me during the pass holder preview. So I've never got one in Pandora. I got really lucky one time and was able to pick up a Frozen one a couple days before we went. We actually changed Fast Passes because we saw one opening. But yeah, it's weird. I've never gotten a Seven Dwarfs Mine Train one since I've been a pass holder with a 30-day window, which a lot of other people seem to have better luck than me with that, though.
Yeah, I definitely haven't ever had any issues trying to get Fast Passes to things like Soarin' or Test Track or, I guess other e-ticket attractions that aren't like the big hype. But I think maybe I've gotten lucky a couple of times because I've definitely gotten Frozen Ever After in the 30-day window, and I have at least once gotten a Seven Dwarfs Mine Train in the 30-day window. But the one thing that I probably obviously goes without saying is that if you don't have that 60-day window, you ain't riding Flight of Passage with a Fast Pass.
Nope.
So,
see, I've gotten Flight of Passage on a 30-day window.
Really?
That's incredible.
I did, yeah. Whenever I went in March, I was scheduling my Fast Passes at 7 a.m. Eastern Time when the Fast Pass window opens up for the 30 days, and I knew I was going to Animal Kingdom and Magic Kingdom. Those were the only two parks we were going to go to, so obviously my thought process was go for Flight of Passage first. So I went in, booked, and looked. They didn't have any, so I booked Expedition Everest, refreshed the page, and then Flight of Passage popped up. So I don't know if it was just super, super lucky, and I also managed to get Seven Dwarfs that same time, too.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like somebody was rearranging their fast passes and accidentally changed it and then realized their mistake.
For real, though.
They totally lost out on that then.
Just this past week, as I said earlier, I was just in the parks this past weekend, and I was not planning to go to Disney this past weekend. It just was kind of spur of the moment. So it was awesome that I was able to. But then again, I was like, well, I'm going to be hopping through all 4 parks in one day. I don't know what to book here. I'll just check what's available and try and book from there. And this was on Wednesday. I was going down on Sunday, and there were still fast passes for Frozen and Seven Dwarfs, and I was like mind blown. Granted, they were very late in the day, but I was still a little surprised to see them.
Yeah, and I do think it is a lot easier to get those late night ones because most people that are, have their children with them are not going to want to be out that late. So they're in less demand, I guess.
I've also heard rumors that Disney releases fast passes for those attractions like during the day of, because they do have the rolling fast pass option, but I've never seen them pop up, so I don't know like how I feel about that. I don't know if you guys have heard that one, but that was one that I heard a while ago. I was like, that kind of would make sense.
I could definitely see them doing that for certain rides. I do know that, I don't know if this is a thing they do regularly, but at least when Pandora was still pretty new, they were putting out like Flight of Passage fast passes in waves. So I don't know if they still do that, but I remember Kirsten was really upset because she wasn't able to get one. And then me being the big Disney nerd that I am, sometimes I'm just sitting at work and I'm just like, let me see what I could get a fast pass for if I could if I could transport myself there. And I just happened to see that there was Flight of Passage ones and there was like a good amount of them, so I'd let Kirsten know and she was able to get them. So, I think that's a good point to make is don't give up. Yeah, so if you keep trying, then a lot of times you'll be able to get that fast pass.
Right. I think you covered a lot of my questions in your research. Now let me ask you, I don't know if you went over all of them, but I know you went over some of them. What were the places that you guys have stayed off property, and what do you think was like the best experience in terms of like getting to the park, and like planning wise, I guess? What really felt the easiest for you, and what was just the most overall best stay?
Well, I guess I'll go first. I have stayed at, specifically talking for Disney trips, I've stayed at several other hotels in the Orlando area for other reasons, going to Universal or concerts or whatever else. But specifically for Disney-related purposes, I have stayed at the Marriott Cypress Harbor, Westgate Town Center, Westgate Vacation Villas, and Marriott Harbor Lake. So as far as the hotels go, I used to be a big fan of the Westgate Resort. There's a couple of different, I guess, sections of it. There's Town Center and the villas and, I don't know, towers or something else. But I used to be a fan of that because they had free transportation to and from the parks, and they specifically went to, like, there was a bus for just Magic Kingdom and Epcot, and then there was a bus just for Hollywood Studios and Animal Kingdom. So you didn't have to stop at any other resorts. You didn't have to stop at any other, parks. And they had several that left in the morning and several that came back at different times during the evening. And so the first couple of times I stayed there, it was really nice because you just, I think you had to sign up in advance, but you would get on the one in the morning, whichever one you wanted, and then you could get on whichever one you wanted to leave. And then the most recent time I stayed there, I went to go, sign up, and they're like, oh, well, you have to tell us which one you're which one you're going on and which one you're coming back on. And if you're going on the 9 a.m. one, then you have to come back on the 6 p.m. one. And I was like, why? I don't want to come back at 6 p.m.
Oh, wow.
So that was I would have said probably Westgate as far as transportation before they had that policy. But pretty much every other time I've just driven myself. So that's kind of the only experience I have with actually taking a shuttle to and from a non-Disney resort.
I've stayed at a Days Inn in like 2005. It was the first time that I had gone, and I can't even remember that room. It was probably tiny, just with my family. And when I was a senior in high school, I went down and I was filming our band because they were marching in the parade one of the days. And we stayed at a Holiday Inn that was between Disney and Universal. So it was more in the central Orlando area with like all of the outlet shopping. And we had transportation provided to us, so that was kind of cool. And then the other 2 times I have stayed at Regal Palms, which I had mentioned earlier is about 25 minutes outside of the Disney area. So I think my favorite was probably the one when I went down with the band, just because we had the transportation provided to us and we really didn't have to worry about getting to and from the parks.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
I don't think I have too many other questions. What about you, Brian? Do you have anything?
No, not really. The one resort or hotel, I guess I should say, that we stayed at for a few years, it was at Embassy Suites, I believe, in the Orlando area. It was a really nice hotel, you know, if you don't want the Disney theming. And it was pretty, I remember it being located pretty centrally, I think, between Disney and Universal when we were kind of hopping between both parks. So, might be an option.
I would also just want to throw in there that if you are considering staying off property, to also check out things like Airbnb and VRBO, because a lot of times people will be renting out places that are pretty close by. There's actually a resort that's on property without being on property, and the name is escaping me right now, but I forgot to mention that one actually, that I stayed at, but I can't remember what it's called. I'll have to get it to you and you can put it in the show notes, but it's pretty much inside the resort area without being a Disney resort. And it's condo style, like timeshare, I guess is a better way to put it. So people will be renting out their timeshares on Airbnb and stuff like that. So that's also a pretty good choice for you.
Oh, that's nice. I don't think I've ever actually had any experience with Airbnb. Have you?
Oh, I've stayed Airbnb a lot.
I'm guessing all positives.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like, it's so nice, you know, when you're staying in a house that someone owns, because they take really good care of it generally. So it's kind of like getting to live like a... Now, I haven't stayed at an Airbnb in Orlando. I've stayed in other areas. But generally, it's a really good experience because it's kind of nice to feel like a home away from home rather than feeling like you're in a hotel.
Interesting. But I honestly have nothing else to add to this. Do you guys have anything you want to throw in there to tie this week up? Any fun stories about staying off property or anything?
I can't think of any.
Well, I'll just throw out there that I have had the benefit several times to be able to stay with friends. So my advice to you guys would be to make a friend down there or get one of your friends to move down there, because it is the cheapest way to go to Disney.
So what you're saying is the next time we go to Disney, we're all crashing at Brian's house.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah, I think that's probably would be the most efficient way.
By the way, I just looked it up, and the resort is called the Wyndham Bonnet Creek. And it's literally right beside Caribbean Beach, pretty much.
Oh, wow.
So, it's it is on property without being technically on property.
Nice. So it's
I've stayed there, and it's actually a really nice resort as well. So
cool. So, I guess we will tie that up this week. Thank you, both of you, for all of that information, because I have no idea what staying off property entails. But thank you, Matt, for joining us this week. Real quick before we sign off, where can our listeners find you if they want to check out your podcast?
Yeah, totally. And thank you for having me. It's been really fun talking to you guys. And if you're looking to connect with our podcast, you can search us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, TuneIn, and what's the other one? I don't know. Just look on those three for now.
Pretty much anywhere where podcasts are.
Yeah, pretty much. Except Spotify. We aren't on Spotify yet, which is pretty unfortunate. But you can search Love of the Mouse Podcast, and you can find us on Facebook by searching Love of the Mouse Podcast, Twitter at LOTM Podcast, and also Instagram at LOTM Podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.
And thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this.
Then that's going to do it for us this week. Thanks for joining us again on another episode of the Station 71 podcast. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts from, and leave us a review as well so we can address your questions, comments, concerns on the next episode. If you want to get in touch with us, you can find all of our social media in the show notes, or you can find us online at facebook.com/Station71pod, Twitter at Station71pod, Instagram at Station71podcast, and you can send us a listener email at station71podcast@gmail.com. We hope you enjoyed your ride, and we'll see you real soon.